that first match between HUK MC and Bomber MMA. They know if they want to play Terran, they have a pretty good idea of what they're going to be up against. They have an idea of what they'll be looking for, what they need to prepare for, that heavy gateway style with very well-controlled adepts and blink stalkers. And maybe they just play Zerg because of that. I don't even know.
I mean, there's definite possibility that they switch over to Zerg. We saw that game number 2. Didn't work out nearly as well. I felt like they should have kept with just their Terran because it was obviously dominating enough to take the win. But yeah, I think that's really important. Seeing what your opponents are capable of, seeing all the different builds, it definitely is kind of like a tip-off to know exactly what to do. But in your opinions, PvZ, PvT, what do you think is better for these opponents? Because adepts have been such a huge problem, I think, for some of these players.
Well, I feel like if MASA and Violet decide to go for Terran, I feel like you know, HUK and MC don't even need to change their build. Even though Violet and MASA have seen it, I feel like HUK and MC will be thinking, can you stop it? You've seen what we're doing, but we're just going to continue to do it and crush Terrans with it. But on the Zerg side of things, I do feel like Zerg has a better chance against Protoss than Terran does right now. It's just going to it's going to come down to how much did Violet and MASA actually practice ZVP over TVP.
And it's crazy because, you know, these teams are enigmas. We don't really know too much about them, but we're going to find out right now. This is the winners finals. Let's kick it over to the casters, Total Biscuit and Todd.
Thank you very much, Greetorp, and we are going to see a fantastic Protoss versus Terran between these two teams. Now, I was actually talking to HUK and MC down in the green room before they came in, and they were watching the series, and it was interesting to watch their opinions change. They started by saying, yeah, who would we want in the next match? Like, yeah, we definitely want Violet and MASA. And as the series went on, it started like, you know, would probably prefer DRG and True right now. These guys are doing pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like Don Gregor and True probably thought the same thing as they were playing, and they probably thought it's much harder than we had anticipated.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All right, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Terraform. And to the southeast position in the blue trunks. They will be playing Terran, this time around the blue Archon of Violet and MASA. Versus their opponents to the northwest position, the red Archon players playing Protoss. The one and only HUK and MC.
Violet and MASA, they already got to watch a little bit of Protoss versus Terran earlier today, and I'm not talking about Roddy against Nathanias, but we saw MMA and Bomber earlier go up against HUK and MC. I'm sure they were paying a lot of attention here to those games, and they probably made the right deductions in how to try and go about properly countering here their opponents in terms of making sure, you know, they don't take any damage, not just early on, but later on, you know, when adepts come into play, when there is blink stalkers. HUK and MC, I fully expect them to play the exact same style they did earlier.
I would imagine so. At this point, it's if you have a style that works, you might as well stick with it until it ceases to work. And I have to wonder how much Violet and MASA have been practicing against Protoss. They must have thought going into this event that HUK and MC are a threat. They absolutely saw what was going on with the previous tournament where HUK and MC were just dominating.
Yeah, I really wonder actually what their approach is going to be. You know, I talked about how kind of turtling and not playing as aggressive as you would usually might be really good for them, just because HUK and MC, they skip on those upgrades for a very long time and they don't go for any kind of huge AoE like High Templars or Disruptor or even Colossus. So if Violet and MASA were to play a little bit more passive, make sure they go up to 3 bases, they don't take any damage against the War Prism, I think they'd be in a good position to win the upcoming fights with some Ghosts in particular.
Nice move so far from the Reaper, controlled by Violet and MASA, using the grenade to knock that adept back, which can do huge damage. But what do we have here? We have a proxy starport of all things going down here for the Terran Archon.
Yeah, since they went for a gas first, actually, it's going to come out very, very quickly. And there could be a Cloak Banshee here in the plans, I think, from Violet and MASA. They probably picked up on the fact that HUK and MC, they don't really check everywhere on the map like this. There was one time, I think in the series, it was on Moonlight Madness, where they put some real effort into making sure something like that wasn't happening. But in this case, I really feel like Violet and MASA, this is a little bit of a gamble, but if it somehow is not expected and it pays off, they're going to do so much damage, which is going to be insane.
Yeah, and Proxy Banshee is most likely. Some people might be thinking, well, why couldn't it be a Liberator? Well, generally speaking, the Liberator is not so amazing early game against the Protoss, but more importantly, a couple of days ago there was a patch which actually removed the Liberator's ground attack unless you research it, which means that it takes a lot longer, and what was going on is not practical anymore. But it looks like that is actually Liberator tech, though.
Yeah,
they're actually going to do it, even regardless of the fact that it was patched. That is really interesting.
Yeah, they want to try it, probably prepared it, and well, I guess we'll see how it goes. If HUK and MC really don't expect it, this could do quite a bit, but the War Prism is going to start heading across the map. And we've got 4 gateways in the production tab here right now from our Protoss Archon, so that's going to be quite a few gateways here to be able to reinforce and make this aggression a very strong one.
I like the moves from the Protoss Archon there. They were repeatedly using the Ghost from the Adept to scout. Now it gets cleaned up. But the thing is, the Protoss now have a good idea of the force composition, how many units are available for the Terran. So perhaps they're feeling a little bit more confident. That Widowmine not borrowed and now scouted here. And down go the Adepts and immediately engaged by a Marauder.
Yeah, and they're going to start whopping in a lot of Adepts there. HUK and MC, they know that they can do a lot here with this if they micro it right as well.
They absolutely can. Adepts just chew through Marines, but there is a Widowmine in position, which actually goes off in the middle of the Terran. Absolutely not what you want there. That's going to soften them up. Marauders being produced, they do a decent job of cleaning up the Adepts. There's another Widowmine going off, but now, of course, worker harassment. In the meantime, though, of course, over the other side, and that was a lovely hit right there. The Liberator will be on its way.
Yeah, Defender mode just completed. The first Liberator is now out and headed for the mineral line here of the Protoss Archon. Starting to do some very good damage there.
Yep, it's forced everything to be pulled back. In that particular position there, you can use that photon overcharge, which is kind of why that doesn't work quite as well. And in the meantime, if we look back to the Terran base, you can see the amount of Adepts that are coming in is getting overpowering. And I don't know if the Terran production can hold up. There's a lot of damage being done to those Adepts, though.
HUK and MC, they just love making this many Adepts. They're very good with it. Now we see more harassment in the natural. So many SCVs have already died. They're down to 25 against 41 probes. This Liberator didn't do nearly as much as this War Prism did here with all of the Adepts that were warped in, and now they're even going for a Stargate to make sure they can shut down the Liberator.
Well, they just cracked the front, didn't they, with that Immortal, and I don't even know if they'll need that considering the amount of damage they're doing. Lovely micro there. Look at the difference in worker count. 10 to 41, equal-sized armies, but that's not going to make much of a difference when you've got Immortal tech coming down to hammer home on those supply depots. It eats the hit, which is damaging, but I don't know if the Terran can come back from this position.
Yeah, there is a Void Ray now on the way to make sure that they can shut down the Liberator properly. With 38 SCVs dead, HUK and MC. In this kind of game where there's a lot of action and they are across the map countering, it just seems that they can't lose. No matter what, they don't lose.
When you head, get further ahead. Yeah. Third base coming down there, which inadvertently spots the proxy starport, which frankly isn't going to provide anything for the Terran player anymore. Oh, what a bait! Wonderful play there by the Protoss, using a hallucination to bait the mine shot right into the middle of the Terran.
Even now, a Void Ray going to town here on that starport behind this, even getting the third base in front of the starport. I mean, why not? They don't even care.
Sure.
And HUK and MC, unless you get some kind of build order win, or very lucky in terms of build orders, like MMA and Bomber did in map number 1 on Bridgehead against them, it seems really hard to beat these guys in this matchup.
It really does. I have to wonder about that Proxy Liberator play. It's obviously something they prepared prior to the patch, because that would have come out quite a bit quicker as a result of that research there. But even then, you get a few probe kills, and then you get, there's the GG. Unsurprising, really, I suppose. I mean, the Protoss player was so far ahead at that point. The Terran was bottled in his base, wasn't able to get out, and that, as they say, was that. But I mean, do you think, from your perspective as a Protoss player, if somebody did that to you, it seems like the response from HUK and MC was pretty much perfect. They lost very little to that.
Yeah, and the thing is, they were already going for something that's very good against some kind of proxy. Even if it had been a Cloak Banshee, to be honest, or even Banshee without Cloak in this case. Because they were going for the Adept and War Prism across the map with a lot of gateways, and because it's so strong, any kind of counter-attack like this from Violet and MASA, unless it's something like, say, a factory with some proxied Widowmines, which even then it's not that great because they go for a robo quickly, I don't think any kind of counter-attack works. I really feel like right now the only way you can go about playing properly against this is to play defensively. Focus on the defense, because just This Warp Prism with Adepts just kills everything.
Yeah, and there's only 2 coming in, but then he warps 4 more, so you've suddenly got 6. There's like 1 Marauder in the mix. You're kind of relying on mine hits, and they did get a few decent ones, but Widow Mines don't outright kill Adepts. They just have too much health. So as a result, once your Widow Mine defense is gone, your Marines just get cut down incredibly quickly. And as you can see, if a small group of Adepts moves to, and that was just such a lovely play, if they move to the mineral line, that's suddenly a bunch of workers killed almost instantly.
Adepts don't just do a lot of damage, they're also very tanky, and I think that's what makes it really difficult for a Terran player to deal with them, and that's why we've seen quite a few Terrans today here, or Terran Archons rather, have trouble to deal with them, really.
And I wonder what the solution is to that. Obviously, people are trying to figure it out. If you're able to extend the game, then maybe the Ghost Academy is a decent answer, but this is early game Adept play for the most part. And it's dangerous.
Yeah.
It's very hard to stop. I mean, what do you think? You know, if a Terran player, for instance, went mech, would they be in the same position?
I think you just need to focus everything on the defense, no matter what. If you're across the map, it's going to be just so hard to have enough back at home to defend against this kind of play. And in this case, being able to spot what was coming definitely would have helped a lot more here for MASA and Violet. It just seems like they just caught off guard. Really.
Yeah, that is very true. If they hadn't gone for the proxy play, they'd have had a lot more resources to dedicate to defense, and they would have been on the same number of bases as the Protoss. It's cool to see the Terran trying these little aggressive moves here and there. Obviously, it worked when Bomber and MMA attempted it. Didn't really work out this time. Would expect perhaps a more standard game in Game 2.
Honestly, also, Reaper opener on this map, like, there's this one pylon that doesn't allow you to jump into the main, so then you're locked from the natural by Mothership Core, by sometimes a Stalker, or even an Adept, which in this case was even chasing the Reaper on the map. So Reaper opener is probably not that strong, I think.
Right.
Probably better to just go for an SCV scout early on and then just try to have a well-rounded defense in general.
Yeah, they're going to have to figure something out, and hopefully that was just a little pocket build that perhaps they tried before the patch and thought, we'll give it a shot. If it works, great. If not, okay, we've still got a couple more maps to play with. So we'll see if they decide to play a little bit more standard or indeed more defensively, as you were talking about earlier. It does seem like the only way, because that build doesn't seem immediately punishable to me.
It takes incredible discipline, though, in an Archon mode match to say, all right, we're just both going to stay at home, macro, and wait for something to come and then defend it, because then you're essentially not doing much.
Yeah.
You're just sitting there waiting for something to happen from your opponent. And MC and HUK, even though, you know, they do very well aggressively, if you sit back at home and you defend, they're still going to take that very quick third base. They're still going to go for the gateway explosion and reach their composition. So it's still very, very hard to deal with them properly here in this case.
Yeah, as you said, it's a little bit counterintuitive. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are moving into the second map of this best of 5 series here, and it's going to be played on Ruins of Ceres. Ladies and gentlemen, to the west position in the blue trunks playing Terran, it is Violet and MASA. And their opponents looking nigh on unstoppable against Terran at the moment. Will they be able to maintain the streak? We will very soon find out. It is the team of HUK and MC.
It's so funny to look at them. MC is the only one talking. He's giving orders, and HUK is listening, I'm guessing, and applying everything that the boss himself is saying.
Yes, Master. Right away, Master. I can imagine that. Whatever the case, it works, and that's all that really matters. The teamwork between them has obviously been fantastic up to this point. It's shown really no signs of breaking apart. The only trepidation, I suppose, we saw from those guys was in the first game against Bomber and MMA, where they just ended up in an unusual position. It didn't go as planned, and I wonder if you can throw them off balance like that again. Is that something that's possible, or was that just a one-game fluke?
It took something very special. You know, the Reaper with the grenades allowing the Widow Mine to jump into the main like this. It came so fast, and it was just such a strong build altogether. So unless they play on this map again and somehow they're not ready for it, it seems like HUK and MC in any other kind of game, they're just so confident. They're so good at using Adepts and Stalkers together.
That's interesting. So we've got a CC first there into 3 barracks here from the Terran player. Perhaps maybe a few more than we're used to. I believe it's a gasless opening as well from the Terran.
Yeah, they're going to be massing on some of those Marines here early on in the game. We've seen that earlier against HUK and MC when Bomber and MMA did a similar build. And back then, HUK and MC, they identified it very early, and they went for the quick third nexus themselves with an Oracle doing some harassment. So 2 passing ships in the night here. That's what we say when 2 walkers like this pass each other. And right now, both teams are going to start realizing where exactly they're at, but they're not. I don't think either of them will be able to get a good scout here early on.
Yep, Nexus goes down here, and tech-wise, we see a very, very early robo here out of HUK and MC. As I suppose if it isn't broke, don't fix it. We will be perhaps seeing a very early observer. They're maybe just a little bit worried about something with Widowmines, but more to the point, it lets them get their Warp Prism out.
Last game, it was actually a much higher amount of gateways than they did before. I think they made 4 at first, and then they did on some more as well. So when you go up to 5 gates this early on in the game, you're really committing to heavy aggression, and you want to do a lot of damage with it. Why were these Marines even there?
Yeah, it doesn't really work, does it? The problem is you can just do that. Traditionally, you do that just obviously to block off a probe scout, but you can't block that. That's the problem. And right now, he will not commit. There's no way, but he doesn't want to get his adept trapped. He's just going to scout with it. Oh, so close. Very uncharacteristic micro slip there, perhaps by HUK and MC.
By HUK.
Okay, fine.
MC wouldn't make the mistake. He's probably scolding him right now. Would you lose so many hit points? War Prism is now going to start. Where are the gateways? Siege time. How many of them?
All right, 2 to begin with.
There's going to be more.
Yeah, you would think so, wouldn't you?
At least 3 more here for now. For Protoss Archon, who just love this build. War Prism and Adepts, that's where it's at right now in Protoss versus Terran. And they just seem to do well with it every single game that they use this build. But in this case, I feel like Violet and MASA, they finally picked up on what they might need to do. Just sit back at home. They open with 3 barracks, remember? So they're going to have a lot of Marines. They're going to have a bunch of Marauders as well to help against this. And if they can shut down the first War Prism very well, they're going to be in a good position, but they are moving out now.
Risky. I do like the decision to go for the earlier concussive shell. That's very nice. You're trying to disable the ability of the opponent to actually micro around. They miss the War Prism. We could end up in a very similar position here. As you said, it's very hard to be patient, it seems. As an Archon team, you want to use those actions per minute. You want to get aggressive, and that gets spotted on the way in there as well.
The pylons are at the front here, by the way. For HUK and MC, they're going to react on time, pull back the Mothership Core, double photon overcharge here on these pylons will go down very quickly to make sure they don't take any damage. But now the Terran Archon can just wait it out, by the way. It's only 11 seconds on the photon overcharge.
This Marauder is doing a good job of tanking, but bear in mind the micro capability of that War Prism is kind of ridiculous, and damage is going to be done here. The follow-up comes in, but he's warping up additional Adept. The question is, has the Terran army managed to push into the base as of yet, or is it coming back?
It's pulling back. I don't know why. They could have just waited until photon overcharge had handed and then tried to get back in there, but Violet and MASA, they pull back instead. Now a single Adept will make its way to the main. They've already lost 7 SCVs here. It's not looking good.
Oh, and they're fighting the Adept, that's the worst choke point possible. It eventually beats it, but there's 4 more on the follow-up here. We need to see the Terran army move into that base incredibly fast to deal with this, but they're losing so much. And really, how big of a commitment is this from the Protoss?
Not much. Even if they lose this here now, the damage has already been done here by the Protoss Archon. Violet and MASA are going to be stuck in their base. And behind this, what do we see from HUK and MC? More gateways. They made so many gateways. They just added 4 more. They can go for a 3rd base if they want to. They've already massed so many units here back at home. So they're just going to be in a fantastic position. And usually what we see from them, when they have this much against a Terran who has this little, they just move across the map and try to end it.
I mean, why wouldn't you at this point? Unless, of course, the Widowmine has something to say about that, which so far they've managed to avoid it. Ultimately, you've got an economic advantage. You know your opponent is struggling. You know you've got a composition that works. Why not try and hammer the point home?
Absolutely, yeah. HUK and MC, they're going to be getting right in there. They've got sentries. That's when MC says, let me micro the army, man, because I've got the better force fields.
Oh, Stim is done, but there are no medevacs at the moment. The force field's not doing a great deal up to this point. We see the Viking doing a good job of trying to shut the Warp Prism down. It hasn't managed it yet, though. Focus fire from the sentries. So far, there we go. The big engagement coming in. The force field set up. The SCV's kind of trapped, but a lot of Terran firepower raining down on the Protoss army at the moment. Warp Prism goes down as well, and there goes the Viking, but I don't know if there's enough numbers here. There's so many Adepts, so what do you even do from this position? You give up. GG again. HUK and MC once again proving that build works incredibly well, and hey, if it keeps working, keep doing it. Violet and MASA now have 1 game to figure out what is the answer to that.
These adepts, man, they're just too good right now. It seems like there's really not much that can be done. You need to play a perfect game, and I think it was far from that here from Violet and MASA, but they can't give up just yet. They need to continue. They need to find a way. But man, I have to say, these adepts.
Adepts are very, very good. There's no doubt about that. Although when most of your army is across the map when they land, I guess there's not much you can do about that. Do you think they should have continued to commit? You mentioned earlier they were waiting out the 11-second photon overcharge. Do you think they should have gone in and tried to kill that natural at that point and then pulled back?
Yeah, definitely. Photon overcharge really doesn't last very long. Maybe they didn't read about the recent changes, and I think it's lasted a little bit longer.
Yeah, it used to be 21 seconds. It's now 11. And that's really not all that long. You know, it's a few shots off those two pylons there. And unfortunately, they decided, maybe a moment's hesitation, maybe they bottled their confidence and they actually pulled back. And I'm looking at the size of the army and I'm thinking, that kills that natural 99% of the time.
Yeah, I think there was 3 adepts that were warped in back at home for HUK and MC back then, and there was a sentry as well for Guardian Shield. The sentry is actually so smart. You can tell how meticulous HUK and MC are with this build, how much they practice it. This is typical of the MC. We've seen him in the past always in the Terran versus Protoss matchup, get a sentry early on, make sure he has some Guardian Shield to fight those early on attacks. And in this case, that sentry, maybe that's what scared Violet and MASA. They saw a sentry, they saw 3 adepts, they were like, okay, we don't want any of that, because they didn't have Steam Pack yet. Yes. They made Combat Shield, but Steam Pack was still a long way off. So moving out in the first place, I think, was the big mistake here out of them.
Yeah, you mentioned it before, and it seems like it's holding true. You do need to be patient. You really do. I mean, think about it. That move out achieved nothing. No doubt about that. And it basically lost them the game because they weren't able to defend. And the Protoss was able to build up a position, actually warp in safely. Yeah. And their warp prism, there was basically no risk to it. There was nothing to kill it. The Viking came out eventually, but it didn't matter. By that point, the army was over the other side of the map, so it doesn't really make much of a difference.
You know, these Adept and Warp Prism drops here, they really remind me of these double immortal drops that you do in PvP if both players open with an expansion, because then there is no Stargates for Phoenix to shut it down, there is no blink, and a lot of the time you can snipe a lot of stuff, pylons and all that. But then Protoss, they started getting a lot better at splitting their units and having enough on the ground that when these immortals finally land and you drop them down, they start getting damage immediately. So then you can't do any damage with them. And I feel like this is what needs to happen as well in some of these games. If Violet and MASA had stayed at home, if they made sure that those adepts never landed from the Warp Prism and the Warp Prism was never allowed to warp in anything, they would have done fine in this game. They would have stayed alive, maybe got a bunch of Vikings, make sure that they can shut down the Warp Prism properly down the line. You go into a third base, and then you have a normal games on your hand. At least you don't die early on like they do.
What's interesting is that so far we have not seen TVP go to the late game in this tournament. And that interests me because I wish to see where it would go at that point. The problem is nobody's surviving that long. And I wonder if there is a passive playstyle that would allow that to happen, as you mentioned. Maybe there is. And hopefully Violet and MASA can find it. Otherwise, they will be finding themselves quite quickly in the lower bracket.
I was theorizing earlier, actually, with Greatorp. Imagine if both teams here, both Archons maxed out, and then you have a Terran that's controlling the Bio and the Vikings, and the other one that only does the Ghosts. Imagine how good the Ghost control will be. Scans everywhere, a bunch of EMPs going on these High Templars that should be there as well. And on the other side, imagine one Protoss controls the main chunk of the army and the Disruptors, and the other one controls only High Templars, War Prism, and maybe the Blink Stalkers as well, to try and snipe the Vikings and zone them out. That'd be crazy. I want to see that.
We did see a little bit of that, if I recall correctly, in the previous tournament in Santa Monica leading up to this. And as far as I'm aware, it did work incredibly well. But it seems pretty rare for Terran to get Protoss to this point. And I think that perhaps these guys maybe should have looked at QXE and Beastie QT's VODs, because they have a very different way of playing this matchup. And it seems to work out for them. Didn't work out quite well enough to get them to this tournament, but their performance was very impressive. And I think they were playing a very different style to every other Terran team in that tournament.
Violet and MASA, it feels like they have a very good grasp on how to play against Zerg when they use Terran, but against Protoss, they are a little bit lost right now. They tried here in the previous game to go for a command center first, 3 barracks, make a bunch of Marines, move across the map, but it just didn't work out. It's time to change things up again. They need to try something different, and they need to start some sort of a comeback here, because otherwise they're going to be heading to that lower bracket, and HUK and MC will be waiting and sitting pretty in the grand finals.
Oh, yes, and that would be a great position for them. All right, folks, we're heading into map 3, which could potentially be the last map of this series. We're going to be playing here on Moonlight Madness. So, ladies and gentlemen, to the... Oh, ho, ho, ho. All right, then. To the northeast position in the blue trunks, switching to Zerg. It is Violet and MASA. Versus their opponents to the southwest position, who may have got a little bit of a shock there, but still have a couple of maps in hand. It is HUK and MC.
Yeah, well, I guess they couldn't figure out Terran versus Protoss, so let's try to do it in Zerg versus Protoss instead. And HUK and MC here, surely they know how to play against Zerg as well. It's going to be interesting to see exactly what build they head into. And Violet and MASA, unless they're very well prepared, I expect them to still meet trouble here against HUK and MC, who just seem poised to do very well this tournament.
This is a gamble, certainly, from Violet and MASA, and it seems to me that they have concluded they can't figure out a good solution to that adept attack. So as a result, they're going to deny the Protoss the ability to do that building quite the same way. They could still do it, absolutely, but there are a lot of different factors to consider when you're playing that against Zerg as opposed to Terran.
It would be funny, actually, if HUK and MC, they try to prove a point.
Did it anyway?
Yeah.
How well would...
Without the War Prism, just Adept.
All right, sure, why not? Just pure Adept. How well would that work exactly? I mean, obviously Roaches and Ravagers do pretty well against Adepts, so you've got a more basic unit that seems to function reasonably well against that.
I think you're just even massing on Zerglings, you can like shut it down a lot better, and that's probably like part of their plan here. Like the initial Adept will not do nearly as much, and then War Prism or not, as long as you have enough back at home here as Zerg, you're not going to worry, because you're going to have creep, you're going to have vision all the time of where that War Prism is, and you're going to have a lot of speed on that creep as well. So some kind of War Prism flying into the main and warping in Adepts, I don't really believe in that against Zerg particularly.
A couple of Lings out already, just chasing that probe away. A little bit of scouting information given away to the Protoss player, although nothing too crazy. Speed on the way as well. So if we do see some Adepts out, once the Speedlings are out, as long as there aren't too many Adepts, you can surround and kill them. It is, of course, worth noting that the Adept does a lot of damage to light units. Nice save on the probe there, just driving those Lings back. And going to try and chase them down before they get speed, perhaps.
Yeah, going straight across the map. I don't think it's going to be cancelled. Yeah,
it's going to warp out. Yeah, that works. I mean, you get the Lings out of the way. You're able to put on some pressure. Queens actually deal relatively well with Adepts, by the way. They don't take a lot of damage. They've got a lot of hit points, and their attack will absolutely deal with them.
Oh, actually went through with it here. So that's
surprising.
He's going to start taking a little bit of damage here.
Well, he's going to be able to get some Lings, but he will certainly eventually die off.
See already the difference between versus Terran and Zerg here.
Little photon overcharge used there, I think, to deal with some scouting Zerglings by the looks of it. But yeah, there is a huge difference. As you said, it's like Zerg starts off with a unit that handles the Adept well, and that's the Queen that you always have. Whereas the Terran, your basic bread and butter unit is the Marine, which gets chewed up by Adepts. So it can be a little bit tricky. So nice start here for Violet and MASA. The question is, what does the Protoss do from here? Well, looks like they try and do exactly the same thing. Give it another shot. Why not? You've got your 2 maps up. Your strategy works. Give it a try. There are a couple of sentries there. I do wonder if they'll maybe vary it up a little bit, try and split off the main from the natural.
I really wonder actually what Violet and MASA are planning here, because they went for a pretty quick lair. They're only on 2 bases for now. They're taking additional Cassis. Do they try to go for Hydras, Mutas? I don't think an Infestation Pit is likely.
I like Mutalisk here, honestly. Especially if your opponent's gone heavy Warp Prism, you absolutely want to do that. That's a little cheeky. Oh, there we go. He's trying to actually a bit of a supply block there for Violet MASA as well. And it is going to be 2-way Spire, and that is a well-hidden Spire.
Yeah.
Interesting place to put it. That is not going to be scouted for quite some time.
That's actually pretty risky. If the Warp Prism flew through there, then that
would be dead. Yeah, that would be awful. But it doesn't look like it's going to happen based on the flight path. I believe there are sentries in that
There's not many units here out on the map for Violet and MASA. They're on 19 army supply. The Squints are going to help, but they need to be careful. They could lose a lot here very quickly.
Force field whiffed. No, that is uncharacteristic.
That War Prism, no! He's going in that direction.
That was nicely warded off there by Violet MASA, just chasing down, said, go that way, not the other way. Nope, nothing to see here. Third base coming down here for the Protoss player. And there's the third base for the Zerg as well. But the Spire play seems good. You know, if you're going to invest a lot in Adepts, then you just don't have that anti-air capability.
HUK and MC really haven't been able to scout anything. They haven't seen any tech building here, so they are playing as if they think it's going to be some kind of Roach Ravager play standard right now. But in this case, with the Spire about to finish and 800 gas in the bank, those Mutas, they're going to start coming out now. And HUK and MC, they're not ready at all. They made an Immortal, they're queuing up a second one.
Oh no.
Stalker counts. Do they even have a single Stalker?
Well, they're working on Blink at the moment. I assume they're going to start building some Stalkers, but like you said, they're investing a lot in Immortals. Well. I mean, Colossus does not count Mutas in, not even in this expansion. And a nice surround there with the Lings. We could, of course, see a quick hot pickup there, but Adepts are dying regardless. There are a lot of Lings there. Yeah. Eventually they'll be pushed back, but hello, he says. The Mutalists come in, and suddenly that Warp Prism is dead, and everything on the ground is going to shortly follow, but not before. Oh, he cancels the warp in. Okay, I thought he was going to just go for a last-ditch effort. They're going to... I thought they perhaps believed there were a few more workers there, but there weren't. And that was 3 workers traded for a Warp Prism, 5 Adepts, cannons going up everywhere as a result.
I don't think HUK and MC had a single Stalkers back at home here, so getting a lot of these cannons. They
got a lot of
sentries,
but yeah, this is a really awful situation. Let's see how good Photon Overcharge is.
Oh, it's pretty good. We already knew that, I think.
Oh, that is a nice, lovely gift basket of gas-heavy units there for the Mutas. No Photon Overcharge used as of yet. I imagine that Violet MASA will try and bait that out and then switch position.
It's interesting how HUK and MC, by the way, didn't panic, didn't start making a lot of Stalkers. They made cannons instead. They know that they have the Photon Overcharge to work with. Would be interesting if they don't even care about the Mutas. They just go like for very few Stalkers, which actually is not a huge commitment to Mutas right now. We see a Hydra then about to finish. Already quite a bit of economy here for Violet and MASA, and behind this, they're going to get Ling upgrades and a bunch of Hydralisks. Whereas HUK and MC, they are adding on the extra gateways and getting the Adept upgrade as well.
Interesting. This game is playing out in a very intriguing way. It certainly looks like the switch to Zerg was a good idea here, but the question is, can HUK and MC adapt before they're overrun?
Yeah, those Hydralisks are going to be pretty scary here.
Yeah.
Even if we see a high number of Stalkers, Hydralisk in huge numbers, they can deal very well, you know, with the fact that you have Sentries, Guardian Shield. Infestation Pit is now going to go down as well, so I think Violet and MASA, they might already be thinking about taking to Hive were they to be safe. But HUK and MC now move out.
I do like the commitment to Hydras there. Hello, got a little bit of a Ling run by going into the base. This could do damage. There are, as we said, a decent amount of photon cannons, and of course harassment coming in to the left screen there. You can see with the Mutalists doing some damage as well. I love this multitasking here by the Zerg player, but the power army is making its way across the map. Nice blink. The Hydra count isn't that high yet.
Yeah, I think Violet and MASA, they might have to pull some drones here. They need to make sure that they hold this attack. Force fields is really going to be very important here. And it's very threatening here to a position like this against a Zerg player.
Oh, here come the Lings trying to make their way through. Down goes the Warp Prism almost immediately, and the Hydra firepower is being concentrated, but that is a lot of Blink Stalkers regardless, and the Lings can't get in. Mutas are coming from behind, but there's not all that many of them.
Yeah, there might be enough here for HUK and MC to do more damage, maybe even finish the game. They're trading very nicely, stamping all of those Mutas, and right now, Violet and MASA are struggling to stay in this.
Lings are trying to make their way in, but they just aren't quite enough to get to grips with the Stalkers. A bunch of coming out. Drones are now pulled. Interesting that they do it now. Maybe they should have done it earlier, but it looks like that Immortal's going to get caught out of position. With the drone pull, the Protoss player is pushed back for the time being. Now, if they could just get some more Lings and Hydras.
Yeah, absolutely. HUK and MC being pushed back there. They didn't lose too many probes back at home. They're on 56 against 67 drones, but being 3-base Protoss against 3-base Zerg definitely is going to be a nice position here for them. It looks like they don't want to slow down here just yet. They just keep on moving across the map. Pathogen Glance now starts.
Interesting. All right, that's going to mix things up, but will they even get to that point? More Lings being added in. The Sentry count is relatively low, and the Lings get the surround here on the Adepts and try to do some damage, but pushed back. The Hydra's doing damage from behind, but is there enough Zerg here? It doesn't look like there is at the moment.
Absolutely. These Adepts will trap these Hydralists here and force them to fight.
Oh, here we go. The Adepts are taking a lot of damage, but they're also chewing up the Hydras as well. Drones have been pulled, and now the Hydras will attempt to engage a huge count of Blink Stalkers. More Lings getting contact, but look at the big warp in from behind there with the Warp Prism. Additional Adepts and a little bit of Micro coming in here as well, and the Zerg army is starting to fall apart. It was a brave effort, a brave attempt here to switch, but it wasn't enough. GG 3-0 sweep for HUK and MC. They find themselves sitting pretty right at the top of the table.
Adepts and Stalkers, total biscuit. They are good against Terran, and apparently they're pretty damn good against Zerg as well.
It would certainly seem that way. It was really interesting to see that they got completely caught off guard in terms of the tech. They had no idea what was coming, but it didn't seem to make a difference. They were able to defend against it without taking too much damage. And then they decided, okay, we're just going to make a big, powerful army. We know you've committed quite a lot to these Mutalisks. We're just going to go for it. And it was a shame. If they'd held out a couple more minutes, got some Infestors out, built the Hydra count up, that would have been a very different fight, I think.
Yeah, they had a lot of gas as well. If our Zerg Archon there had been able to make a bunch of Infestors, that definitely could have changed something. But HUK and MC, I have to say, they play very impressive. You know, they do everything right. They drop down a bunch of gateways, they move across the map, they keep on being very aggressive, and every single time the execution is really good by them in the offense and the macro at the same time. Archon mode really allowing them to shine a lot here today.
That is very true. We'll have a look at a couple of the highlights here. The single Adept eventually getting taken down, not before trading fairly well for a few units. And we see that they were going for the same kind of build. The Warp Prism on its way out. We're not really sure what was going on there. And then you've got that Proxy Spire, which doesn't get scouted. And yet it still isn't quite enough to make it happen. Adepts are very, very strong. The Mutas finally come in and do clean this up. But after that, loads of cannons go down. You see all the harassment being warded away with photon overcharging cannons, and then comes the big push. Lots of gateways backing this up, a couple of Immortals, a lot of power in that army.
I feel like Violet and MASA, they needed to either stay on Mutaling or go into Ravagers. Because going into Hydralists there made Force Fields and Blink together really, really strong. And it really also like made the Mutas having to come back and defend. So that just wasn't good together. Like if you think about what's going to be good in terms of having a lot of sentries and Stalkers, I feel like if you get Lings and Ravagers together to break the force fields, it's going to be going a lot better for Violet and MASA. In particular, I mean, the Lings, they even do very well, I think, in high numbers against the Adepts.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right with that. And we are about ready to head down to the main stage. We're going to be having a few words with HUK and MC, who continue to advance through this tournament and are looking perhaps like the odds-on favorites.
Guys, I'm here on stage with HUK and MC, who've just made it to the winner bracket final. You guys just went up against MASA and Violet. They looked so strong in their first series in the day, but at the same time, it felt like you guys were always in control. Was there ever a moment where you worried?
No, just when I come to here, it's ours. Where's trophy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Already wants the trophy. You know, even in that final game when the Mutalists kind of surprised you guys, wasn't there a tiny bit moment where you worried?
In the game, I asked him, they have third base, maybe Muta, and 100% Muta, so I made cannons. And you know, I think now Protoss only one have Imba unit is Mother's Core. So Muta, no clue because many overcharge. So I thought, yeah, it's maybe dumb choose for them.
Well, I thought it looked dicey, but you guys handled it very well. Chris, you know, in one of the pieces earlier, one of the video segments that we played, you mentioned how much it would mean to you to win this tournament, you know, with your longtime friend MC. You're not there yet, but you're in the winner bracket final, and it seems like everything is going so well right now. You know, what's going through your mind? What are the thoughts so far?
Well, like MC said, we both came to the tournament thinking we're going to win. On top of that, we both brought large luggage so we can pack the trophy in, and we just looking forward to hanging out tonight, maybe drinking a little bit. That's about it.
Wow. Well, you guys still got one very important series to play. Of any of the teams that made it here, is there one team in particular that you're looking out for? Is there anyone you rather avoid in the finals, or does it just not matter?
I want to say something, but it's bad word, so Yeah, be please.
Chris, any of the teams scare you a little bit, or are you feeling so good right now that it doesn't matter?
No, me and MC are confident against all teams, and I'm sick of people talking trash about Protoss right now on Twitter, especially Hydra opening his mouth when he's played no Legacy of the Void. I think it's kind of sad to chime in when you haven't played. And me and MC have been top of the ladder among like 10 Terrans in the last 2 weeks. So maybe people should practice more before they open their mouths.
All right, all right. Well, I'm digging it. Congratulations so far, boys. You've played awesome. Of course, more StarCraft is coming your way, but for now, let's take a look at the team segment of Bomber and MMA.
In that first match between HUK MC and Bomber MMA, they know if they want to play Terran, they have a pretty good idea of what they're going to be up against. They have an idea of what they'll be looking for, what they need to prepare for, that heavy gateway style with very well-controlled Adepts and Blink Stalkers. And maybe they just play Zerg because of that. I don't even know.
I mean, there's definite possibility that they switch over to Zerg. We saw that game number 2. Didn't work out nearly as well. I felt like they should have kept with just their Terran because it was obviously dominating enough to take the win. But yeah, I think that's really important. Seeing what your opponents are capable of, seeing all the different builds, it definitely is kind of like a tip-off to know exactly what to do. But in your opinions, PvZ, PvT, what do you think is better for these opponents? Because Adepts have been such a huge problem, I think, for some of these players.
Well, I feel like if MASA and Violet decide to go for Terran, I feel like you know, HUK and MC don't even need to change their build. Even though Violet and MASA have seen it, I feel like HUK and MC will be thinking, can you stop it? You've seen what we're doing, but we're just going to continue to do it and crush Terrans with it. But on the Zerg side of things, I do feel like Zerg has a better chance against Protoss than Terran does right now. It's just going to it's going to come down to how much did Violet and MASA actually practice ZVP over TVP.
And it's crazy because, you know, these teams are enigmas. We don't really know too much about them, but we're going to find out right now. This is the winners finals. Let's kick it over to the casters, Total Biscuit and Todd.
Thank you very much, Kritorp. And we are going to see a fantastic Protoss versus Terran between these two teams. Now, I was actually talking to HUK and MC down in the green room before they came in, and they were watching the series, and it was interesting to watch their opinions change. They started by saying, yeah, who would we want in the next match? Like, yeah, we definitely want Violet and MASA. And as the series went on, it started like, you know, would probably prefer DRG and True right now. These guys are doing pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like Don Gregor and True probably thought the same thing as they were playing, and they probably thought it's much harder than we had anticipated.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All right, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Terraform. And to the southeast position in the blue trunks. They will be playing Terran, this time around the blue Archon of Violet and MASA. Versus their opponents to the northwest position, the red Archon players playing Protoss. The one and only HUK and MC.
Violet and MASA, they already got to watch a little bit of Protoss versus Terran earlier today, and I'm not talking about Roddy against Nathanias, but we saw MMA and Bomber earlier go up against HUK and MC. I'm sure they were paying a lot of attention here to those games. And
composition, how many units are available for the Terran? So perhaps they're feeling a little bit more confident that Widowmine not borrowed and now scouted here, and down go the Adepts and immediately engaged by Marauder.
Yeah, and they're going to start whopping in a lot of Adepts there. HUK and MC, they know that they can do a lot here with this if they micro it right as well.
They absolutely can. Adepts just chew through Marines, but there is a Widowmine in position, which actually goes off in the middle of the Terran. Absolutely not what you want there. That's going to soften them up. Marauders being produced, they do a decent job of cleaning up the Adepts. There's another Widowmine going off, but now, of course, worker harassment. In the meantime, though, of course, over the other side, and that was a lovely hit right there. The Liberator will be on its way.
Yeah, Defender mode just completed. The first Liberator is now out and headed for the mineral line here of the Protoss Archon. Starting to do some very good damage there.
Yep, it's forced everything to be pulled back. In that particular position there, you can use that photon overcharge, which is kind of why that doesn't work quite as well. And in the meantime, if we look back to the Terran base, you can see the amount of adepts that are coming in is getting overpowering. Yeah. And I don't know if the Terran production can hold up. There's a lot of damage being done to those adepts, though.
HUK and MC, they just love making this many adepts. They're very good with it. Now we see more harassment in the natural. So many SCVs have already died. They're down to 25 against 41 probes. This Liberator didn't do nearly as much as this War Prism did here with all of the adepts that were warped in, and now they're even going for a Stargate to make sure they can shut down the Liberator.
Well, they just cracked the front.
Could be a Cloak Banshee here in the plans, I think, from Violet and MASA. They probably picked up on the fact that HUK and MC, they don't really check everywhere on the map like this. There was one time, I think in the series, it was on Moonlight Madness, where they put some real effort into making sure something like that wasn't happening. But in this case, I really feel like Violet and MASA, this is a little bit of a gamble, but if it somehow is not expected and it pays off, they're going to do so much damage, which is just going to be insane.
Yeah, and Proxy Banshee is most likely. Some people might be thinking, well, why couldn't it be a Liberator? Well, generally speaking, the Liberator is not so amazing early game against the Protoss, but more importantly, a couple of days ago there was a patch which actually removed the Liberator's ground attack unless you research it, which means that it takes a lot longer, and what was going on is not practical anymore. But it looks like that is actually Liberator tech, though.
Yeah,
they're actually going to do it, even regardless of the fact that it was patched. That is really interesting.
Yeah, they want to try it, probably prepared it, and well, I guess we'll see how it goes. If HUK and MC really don't expect it, this could do quite a bit, but the War Prism is going to start heading across the map, and we've got 4 gateways in the production tab here right now from our Protoss Archon, so that's going to be quite a few gateways here to be able to reinforce and make this aggression a very strong one.
I like the moves from the Protoss Archon there. They were repeatedly using the Ghost from the Adept to scout. Now it gets cleaned up, but the thing is the Protoss now have a good idea of the force.
They probably made the right deductions in how to try and go about properly countering here their opponents in terms of making sure, you know, they don't take any damage, not just early on, but later on, you know, when Adepts come into play, when there is Blink Stalkers. HUK and MC, I fully expect them to play the exact same style they did earlier.
I would imagine so. At this point, it's if you have a style that works, you might as well stick with it until it ceases to work. And I have to wonder how much Violet and MASA have been practicing against Protoss. They must have thought going into this event that HUK and MC are a threat. They absolutely saw what was going on with the previous tournament where HUK and MC were just dominating.
Yeah, I really wonder actually what their approach is going to be. You know, I talked about how kind of turtling and not playing as aggressive as you would usually might be really good for them, just because HUK and MC, they skip on those upgrades for a very long time and they don't go for any kind of huge AoE like High Templars or Disruptor or even Colossus. So if Violet and MASA were to play a little bit more passive, make sure they go up to 3 bases, they don't take any damage against the War Prism, I think they'd be in a good position to win the upcoming fights with some Ghosts in particular.
Nice move so far from the Reaper, controlled by Violet and MASA, using the grenade to knock that Adept back, which can do huge damage. But what do we have here? We have a proxy starport of all things going down here for the Terran Archon.
Yeah, since they went for a gas first, actually, it's going to come out very, very quickly. And